Welcome to the Builders Podcast, episode 160. Jim Bishop, Transforming Leadership, Navigating the Changes in Today's Business World. Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share, if we've earned it. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable from the trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another The Builders. Today, we are joined by Jim Bishop. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
So Jim is a leadership guru. He knows a lot about leadership. You do exec coaching. What is it you do? I kind of sometimes let the guests kind of tell us what they do.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I guess in the broadest sense, what we do is we help work cultures not suck so much by helping leaders do more leading and less reacting to the world around them. So we work primarily in the world of executive coaching. We do a little bit of team development work and bring the team behind them. And then we do a little bit of culture mapping to make sure that all those behaviors are shifting in the right direction.
See, that is why I do that sometimes, because you're going to do a way better job than I would. I know my strengths. But anyway, so for the first time you're on the podcast,
yes,
what we like to do on The Builders is dig into your story a little bit, your origin story. How were you created? How did you become this amazing person today in the world helping people? Who influenced you? What's that story look like? So with that, I kind of hand it over to you and do your thing.
Sure. The origin story. Well, let's start at the beginning. I'm classically trained as a scientist. So I entered my bachelor's and master's with the understanding that I was going to go work in science. And I graduated with my master's, went and did a lot of technical consulting. And when I was working with our customers, trying to represent the products and helping them use them most effectively, what we recognized was most of the time they didn't need help with the products. They had a lot of questions on people. So as a secondary benefit, and then as a way to earn more time with my clients, what I would do is network with a lot of my HR colleagues and bring them in. And we'd start doing some presentations on onboarding or career pathing or even succession management and even employee onboarding and talent manuals even. That gave me the awareness that a lot of the things that I had actually learned in school didn't come from a textbook. I had been participating in many clubs and activities, and I'd always been a student of leadership. I just didn't really know I could get a degree in it. So at that point, I kind of pivoted my career, stayed in science, but found a way to work in instructional design and adult education, putting together programs, learning how people learning what some of the business problems were that they were trying to solve, and then putting solutions in place that helped them do that. I found a way to work then in leadership development. What that meant was like putting classroom experiences together for leaders and helping bring them on board and helping bring, when they transition to new levels, what's their new level of responsibility. So a lot of training and development, leadership development, organizational design, eventually into career pathing, succession management, talent management, and then finally ended my corporate career of 25 years working in executive coaching. The reason the pivot to executive coaching came because I just got frustrated. We'd put people in classrooms and they would have a great experience, but they would go back to a structure or a supervisor who wasn't yet quite ready for this. And what they had learned and what they had been inspired didn't actually take root because they went back to their old ways of working. And what I recognized was you can pivot a behavior, but unless you pivot a mindset, nothing really changes. And with the types of leaders that I work with today in executive coaching, most of them have had lots of leadership experience. And so they don't need more training and they don't need more experience. What they need is to repackage the experience that they've already been given into language that can be repurposed and trained through the rest of their organization, and they can actually develop the leadership culture they want. But when they don't really know what they've learned and they don't really know how to share what they've learned with other people, then it doesn't really become relearnable by many other people. And so in the space of executive coaching today, what we have the chance to do is help people create the culture of leadership that they want. But sometimes also, especially with midlife leaders or people who are in the midst of a lot of challenging situations, we need to pivot a brain or pivot a mindset in order to move in a new direction. And that space is actually done best in coaching, not in training or any other sort of development. So
interesting. So you were in corporate kind of the corporate world for like 25 years, you said.
Yes.
And that was, and so was the catalyst to go out on your own to do exec coaching kind of the identifying that problem, or did you always want to kind of work for yourself? Or was there something else that was kind of motivating you?
Well, as most entrepreneurs can say, they can look in the past and make sense of everything that happened. But at the time, it just seemed like a lot of experiences were happening, and some of them were fortunate and some were unfortunate. In a training and development capacity, working in corporate America, there became a time when it felt like the clothes I was wearing was just a little too tight. The way that I wanted to spread my wings wasn't quite the way that the company I was working for wanted to. But the biggest pivot, the biggest moment and opportunity came in the midst of 2020. So I had opened up my LLC in 2017, and I had taken clients on the outside, quote unquote, for several years, and thinking that it would be a plan B at some day when I retired from corporate America. But in 2020, those clients that I had on the outside were making larger strides and larger pivots than the clients that I had internally. And when I started asking them questions, what I recognized was those people that could truly trust me were dropping into their authentic story more quickly than those who felt a little bit of bias because we had both the same business cards or logos. And there was always a hint of maybe you'll share my story with someone else, or maybe you'll work with my boss someday, or maybe something like that will happen. And they were just a little bit more shrouded. But in the midst of 2020, the world was in such upended upheaval that the cultures around those leaders were changing, and they weren't really sure how to change along with it. A lot of them were so focused on keeping the businesses operating, keeping the doors open, and keeping products flowing that they weren't yet thinking about how do I need to become a more adaptable and human-centered leader to help lead these people through this situation. And that required a lot of vulnerability and trust. And when I saw that happening, and I could kind of project forward that this little thing called the pandemic and all this stuff called social unrest wasn't really going to go away, it was going to change us fundamentally forever, I realized that there were going to be a lot of leaders who needed this pivot, and there were going to be a lot of entrepreneurs who were going to set up their businesses in different types of environments than they ever had before. And so it was with that kind of foreshadowing and a lot of conviction that I said, if I'm going to offer this gift to the world, the best way to do it is externally, not internally. And so at the end of 2020, I separated ways with my corporate employment. And with 2 kids going to college and everything else happening, I took a big risk and said, it's time for me to bet on me and bring this thing to the world. So,
yeah, because that's not an easy transition. I mean, you've been used to having this structured world built around you, and you just kind of do your thing within that. But now you're kind of you're spreading your wings and going out on your own. That had to feel a little scary at first.
It was a little scary. I had some good coaches and good mentors beside me at the time. Like I'm obviously a big fan of coaching. I knew I wasn't going to be able to make that transition effectively on my own, entirely on my own. And so it enabled me to kind of, when you step out in entrepreneurship, a lot of things rise up. Your relationship with money, as an example, your relationship with security, your relationship with safety, and this feeling of being in control of most of your day, right? And all of those things are jumbled together in this thing called entrepreneurship. And I needed to learn to handle that, because up to that point, my money was fixed and it came every 2 weeks, and my benefits package was there, and it was just an easy November came around and we re-enrolled for benefits. My understanding of how hard I had to work to get to the next level, I already knew what that meant. My definition of success, I already had a definition of if I achieve this level in my career, that was success. Stepping into entrepreneurship, as you well know, is very, very different. The mindset has to change. Definition of success has to change. As an example, last year into the business, I had to answer the question, do I want to work on the business or in the business more? Because it's growing so quickly that I could scale this faster. But candidly, I didn't leave corporate America so I can manage another large team or manage a large organization or spend more time away from my family. And when those two things are there as tensions, what I had to do was realize I'm comfortable working in the business, and I can find other people to help me work on the business. But I want to do the client work right now because I enjoy it so much.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's something everybody's got to kind of figure out for themselves. Some of us like our craft. We like getting our hands dirty and getting in there. Yeah, I kind of, as owning a web design agency, I grapple with the same thing. I'm doing a lot more management these days. I got, about 10-person team, and we do a lot of stuff. But I am doing a lot more management. But I still try to get my hands dirty. I'm still doing a little bit of design here, a little bit of development there.
Yep.
Because I enjoy it. And so when I talk to people that are like, oh, you got to do this, you got to put these people in place so you can, do, some much bigger, like, okay, maybe let me think about that. But yeah, so you think the biggest thing you struggled with was just, was it the money aspect of it and not having that structure? What was the one thing you struggled the most with, do you think?
I don't think the money thing was a struggle. I think it was a mindset pivot that in corporate America, I had a false perception of security, I would say, right? But nearly 100% of my income came from one source. And when you go into consulting or work like this, many clients make up your source of income. And so I actually feel way more secure today with my income than I did then, because I could be the victim of one downsizing or sitting in the wrong seat when the music stopped in corporate America, and I did nothing to cause it. And I might be re-hunting for a position. In this world, a client may choose not to continue to work with me, or they may time out in their agreements and not renew. Either way, they've gotten the success that they wanted, but I can go find another client. Or if I want to work harder, or we want a little bit more in our family's life, I can go expand the time that I'm willing to give to my clients and take on more. But I've made a conscious decision in my work about what is the capacity that I want to be working at, and how many clients does that mean I can take. And therefore, I am still emotionally present enough to be with each one of my clients in the way that they need to, rather than looking at this as a volume play and how many people can I book through my day. Emotionally, that's exhausting for me, and it doesn't allow me to be the best of service to my clients when they're in a place of trying to sort things out. I need to be physically and emotionally present with them in the moment so that we can both work through those issues.
Yeah, I feel the same way when I'm more a boutique agency, that we're able to take better care of each individual client. So you didn't struggle at all. You just slipped right into it.
I'm not going to say I didn't struggle. There are certainly, and there are still things even today that rise up. The old self will continue to rise up, right? It's the new mindset that I must remind myself often of this is why I did this, right? This is why
is the motivation there? I mean, are you just super excited to get up every day? And
I am. I used to think that old quote, do something you love and you'll never work another day in your life. I used to think that was a bunch of hogwash. Now I actually believe it's totally true. I mean, the money is nice, right? You've got some of that is necessary to live, but it's a sense of purpose and a sense of calling and a sense of legacy right now that I feel like I'm leaving behind way greater. And my children have been exposed to what I'm doing greater because they hear me doing it. They see me doing it. They're helping me in my business a little bit. One of them even chose their college major differently as a result of understanding what I'm doing. Candidly, nice. I said, I've always liked science, but I went into this people world and I like the combination. And if I could do it all over again, I would have studied more about how the brain works. She chose to go into brain and behavioral science because she's like, that's really cool. I didn't know I could do science and use humans as my study object, right? And I'm like, you can, and I wish I would have. So you go get a degree, and someday we'll find a way to plug you into this thing. So
nice. Yeah, that's awesome. And I love too, though, and I think some of the most successful people I've talked to have been not necessarily in corporate world, but they have this background, this experience that they can now package up and help others. Whether it's small businesses or other, people or execs or whatever, and take all of that experience and package it into something, and coach them one-on-one, which is, it seems like that's your strength. It
certainly is a gift, and it certainly is a blessing. You asked the question earlier about, did I always want to be an entrepreneur? How did it come about? Right. And I can say clearly from the very beginning, my family is more entrepreneurial. The way I grew up was in a more entrepreneurial environment. I chose to go into corporate America, but there was always this wrestling of, I'd like to do something on my own someday, right? And I tried a few things along the way, tested the waters, and it just didn't work. And that gave me a kind of some baggage when I was ready to step out into this space to say, is it ready? And I had all these previous experiences of maybe it's not going to work. But I realized that when opportunity meets timing, it's the right thing, right? And before, those things it wasn't the right timing. I didn't have the network. I didn't have the experience. I didn't have the breadth of leaders that I had worked with in corporate America to understand things as well. When I had that experience and the timing came, then what happened was the network started working for me. And I know most people are going to say you got to have your business plan all organized and you got to know what your marketing strategy is going to look like and throw yourself into it. But I kind of just did this on the lean way and said, where is the cash going to come from? And I started talking to people that I already knew and telling them what I was doing. And they started to talk to people and told them what I was doing. And it grew very organically in a way that was more relational because people already knew me and trusted me. And I didn't have to go out and create a brand and put together social media presence and all those kind of things. Those are all important. And I'm not saying they shouldn't happen, but cash was king at the beginning of this thing. So the relationships and the power of the network that I had developed over 25 years was way greater and way more valuable than it would have been had I tried something 10 years prior. Right. So,
yeah, same here. And, especially in the beginning, it was, don't have the brand. I focused on my network and I had already kind of established myself and that's, part of a lot of people that are thinking about going into business. I mean, they got to look at, who and your network and what you can, what you bring to the table and start talking and start putting it out there. Yeah.
I realized in 2020, like sitting behind a computer working for corporate America, there were a lot of these meetings that I was sitting in and I felt that sense of a loss a little bit because in the office, I had more of the false sense of connectedness, right? You're seeing people and going to lunches and doing stuff. You're working remotely most of the time. We didn't have that. But it also forced me to realize, like, stepping out into this entrepreneurial space, this sense of connection that I was really desiring, it comes very organically because that is my network. And as long as I keep my network open and relational, going to lunches or talking on the phone or taking time out of the day on a client call just to be able to call a friend, find out what's going on in their life. Those are not just things that fill my soul, but they actually are helping my business because the more times I have a chance to share with people what's happening, the more times they have a chance to share with their friends who I am. And it's duplicative at that point. So,
you kind of create all these touch points and staying top of mind and just keeping in touch and saying, hey, what's up? And whether that's through social media or picking up the phone. I mean, that's powerful stuff. So, hey, so you're talking a lot about 2020. So what is kind of what really happened there? Like, was that a big pivotal moment? We kind of know what happened, but from an exec's perspective, when they're seeing all this stuff happen, what are the things that they had to change the most? What were they seeing? How were they first reacting, and what did they need? When did they realize that, this is not a one-time thing, this is a permanent thing, I have to change?
Yeah. It's a very loaded question there, right? So I'm going to speak in some very large generalities, but the majority of people who were in leadership at that point in time of mid to large size organizations and even some smaller entrepreneurial situations, the predominant definition that we had of leadership going into this thing was, those leaders that can control the ship and organize things and plan and strategize and direct, right? Those were kind of the strongest leadership competencies. Many of the people who grew up to that point in leadership identified so strongly with their ability to make hard and fast decisions and direct people as to which way to go and control things. Yet in 2020, nobody had really lived through that experience before, and nobody really knew how to keep a business operating in the midst of all of this and shutter your workforce and send them home or do business differently through virtual tools and manage supply chains, right? There were many leaders who stepped back and got scared and said, okay, I've got to rely upon what got me here. hard and fast decisions, controlling, organizing, planning, strategizing. As much as we can do that. Well, planning and strategizing kind of had to go out the window because we didn't have time. It was literally making decisions in the moment, right?
Just happened all at once, right?
Yeah, the next CDC report threw everything, all of our plans into chaos. And so they started to get scared that what they had learned wasn't going to work for them anymore. And then throw on top of that the summer of 2020 when all the social injustice issues started bubbling up and the personal needs of employees came to the forefront while we were mostly working remotely. And leaders were organizing and controlling things to a fine tee that when we got on our Zoom calls, it started with, here's what we got to get done and here's how we got to get off. Here's the emergency update that I'm giving you today. It did not start with any of the relating and connecting that we really needed. To allow people to feel like they could live in this moment in time. Right. If you were to take just even the racial divides that were happening, we weren't talking about how this social injustice issue was causing or helping me or affecting me. What we were doing was we were just ignoring that some of that even happened. That then forced employees to start realizing maybe a different value proposition of what I want for my work. I want to feel connected. I want to feel meaning and purpose, and I want to feel a sense of giving back to something. But I also want to know that my leader is making it safe, or at least allowing safe spots to have all of that happen. But if a leader has a definition that my job is to organize, plan, and control and strategize, they do not see their job as helping employees relate and feel connected and feel bigger or part of something bigger. Then you see what happened after that. The Great Resignation started to happen, right? What's that about? Well, what it's about is a lot of people saying, I'm not going to put up with this anymore, and I'm going to go in search of something that is bigger. Well, they didn't change a lot of their own. They changed a lot of the internal things. So a lot of people changed their external things. And then in 12 to 14 months later, found out like I'm kind of in the same situation I was before because I didn't change anything myself and no other leader has changed. So if you look at that over time, really, there's so many multifactorial issues. Where do you start to solve the problem? The way that I choose to start with it is to find a leader who says, I'm no longer comfortable doing what I'm doing. A leader who says, I know there has to be a better way. I just don't know what that better way is. And it becomes much more of an emotional journey for them at this point to kind of unlearn a little bit of the things that they learned about leadership. That maybe it's not organizing, planning, controlling, and strategizing as much as it is adapting and connecting and adjusting in the moment and experimenting and making your workplaces a little less hierarchical and a little more distributed in the power structures, reducing some of the organization that goes on in the business to give more power and autonomy to the teams of actually who is closer to the business. But that's an entirely different way of a leader showing up. It requires more coaching and more adaptability than they've ever had before. And quite candidly, a lot more emotional intelligence and emotional presence. And so it's just not something that we really taught in business schools. But I've seen a lot of leaders be able to make that shift over the last several years. They are making their cultures more human-centered and adaptable. And now people are actually starting to relate better in the workplaces and step into that autonomy that they really want, but didn't know how to get.
Are there a lot of execs that kind of fought that or just never were able to change? Because, I mean, part of this is personality. You got to want it. You got to have the personality to be able to adapt to this new environment, right? I mean, you got to care. You got to have a certain type of personality.
Well, change by definition requires us to get uncomfortable, right? And sometimes we're afraid of what we're leaving behind more than the opportunity to gain things. And when such a large part of my identity, like if you put yourself in that situation, you got to be the CEO or the founder of your organization because of many of those attributes, right? It is a part of your success story to say, I organized and planned and controlled my way to here. This is synonymous with my success. When I know that working harder and doing more of those things isn't going to get me to a better future, then there's this inordinate sense of loss. Like I'm going to have to leave something up and walk into this unknown future without knowing what I'm picking up. But my job is to help them understand the benefit and the belief of what is coming in the future when, I'll hear a lot of them, as an example, say, I want my employees to be more entrepreneurial. I want them to take risks more. But all day long, they've planned and strategized and directed around the employee that says, here's the swim lane that you're in, and here's as much responsibility as we're going to give you. Well, then the employee doesn't feel that they can step into entrepreneurial space and risk taking because all the rules have been defined for them. In an executive coaching situation, what we can do is start ideating about what would happen if, and what would it be like when employees step into this entrepreneurial space and when they took more risks or took more understanding of responsibility. The exec automatically gets that because that's what they want, but they didn't really attribute the fact that their behaviors were limiting the entrepreneurial spirit that they would like to see in their employee base. In that moment, we come together and a big aha happens, like, if that's going to change, I've got to change. And now they're willing to, right? So to answer your question, every human being has some fear of changing and growing,
right?
Which is why you can see behind me, my 3 stages of coaching are disrupt, bridge, and grow. Because every employee, every person usually says, I want to grow. But before we're going to grow, we've got to disrupt a lot of the current thinking that we have and then bridge to that future so that the growth actually happens. So,
because you're also fearing that you've been doing all this organizing and planning, all that stuff you've been doing structurally, that stuff, you're leaving all that behind, or you changing how you're doing all those things.
Yeah, it's not that the business doesn't need organization and the business doesn't need structure or even discipline and directing at times. It just means the leader doesn't have to do it all, right? It means
so
that
he's
you
giving that to somebody else.
You distribute that across the organization. Let the team organize around the problem that they're trying to solve. Let the team direct themselves around but that requires the leader to be a coach of the team, not a supervisor of the team. Right.
So that's the change. It's distributing what things you've been doing, giving your teams more responsibility to be that entrepreneurial in their thing, whatever they're doing, to come up with ideas and give them more autonomy and ability to do things. I mean, it's interesting. I've never actually worked in like a hardcore like corporate environment. I think the closest I ever got to like a corporate environment was not really the traditional. It was, you talked about the flat organization. I remember that. So I worked for a company called Rapid Crush for like 3-4 years. That was like probably the job when I was younger, I had jobs, but I've been a kind of an entrepreneur business guy for decades. But for like around 2014 to like 18, I worked for a company because somebody convinced me that you'll still be building things, because I like to build things, obviously, but you'll just be doing it for us. And it was a great opportunity. Good guy. It was a great company, and I knew I could learn a lot. So I went there, and then a CEO came in. They hired somebody that a new CEO, and I remember, though, one of the things that they really established was this kind of flat organization where I could go to anybody. I could go to the founder. I could talk to the CEO, and I could go to anybody, and everybody had their responsibilities. They gave you, they were kind of coaching you and helping you become better at this thing and help grow whatever you're doing. That sounds like that is very similar to what a lot of companies actually had to go to. That was probably before, obviously, 2020. They were already kind of running things that way for whatever reason. But now that's kind of becoming important for all companies to build their businesses that way.
It's becoming more prevalent, I will say. Now, there are still some companies who fight that, and they fight that structural change, partly because their leadership's not ready for it. I mean, if their leadership isn't ready to distribute power, and it goes against every identity shift that they have had in their mind, that the aggregation of power is what caused leaders to rise. The aggregation of responsibility, if you will, is what the definition of leadership is. Then it goes in the face of everything that all those leaders know. And when teams start to take more responsibility, it feels like it's getting a little out of control. when leaders aren't comfortable with that feeling of being out of control, then what they do is clamp back down on control, and they'll minimize and try to nip that stuff down pretty quickly, right? But I love to work with entrepreneurial organizations who are in that sweet spot. Like the founder started this place and hired 2 scrappy people alongside of him. And then 3 people did all the jobs of the company of making the product and selling the product and finding the customers and getting it out there. And there were no boundaries, right? Well, then the company continues to grow, and then they add a sales division and a marketing division, and they have to have somebody that manages that. Their natural reaction is to grow the business through adding structure. And as you add structure, you add management, which means you're just supervising and controlling the activities of the lower levels. Well, if I can get in the middle of all of that and help a leader realize what got you here was the scrappiness and the messiness and everybody understands what's going on and the collective consciousness of how the company operates and the feeling of I can solve that problem and I can jump in on that. If you keep that sort of culture and reduce the tendency of humans to need to add structure in order to organize, what can happen is you can build a pretty large organization that is very connected, almost like an ant colony. They know their parts, they know their roles, they go about it, and no one's telling anyone what to do. They just do it. But the people have stepped into that power and responsibility in order to do it. There are some really transformative cultures out there who do that. But if you watch their leaders, they behave very, very differently than the large, organized, and structured companies who have added multiple layers. And then the multiple layers are candidly slowing them down in this unprecedented time where things change so quickly. So
that's the next thing. So you start with the leader, you coach them, you kind of remap their brains to this new paradigm, and then it goes to the teams, and where probably you start to have to have that leader or you help them kind of restructure how their teams work or how you train each individual in the teams to start thinking for themselves and start training them, because they're going to have to be retrained too. They're going to have to learn a new way of doing things or take on new responsibilities. And I don't know, some might not want to. There's probably going to be some pushback.
So you've got the process, right? I mean, for 25 years, we tried to do it the other way. Like corporate America wants to put people in classrooms to change the culture because it seems more efficient. You have one person leading the classroom experience, and then you have 25 people listening. And in one session, you've got 25 people indoctrinated. And they believe that's more efficient. But they go back to that culture and they don't know how to work together, and there isn't a guide there helping them. And so what happens is they're like, it's just easier to do it the old way, right? So yes, we start with the leader. We get them more emotionally comfortable with saying, what does this look like and who do I want to be? And especially a leader who's in this midlife space is where I find my sweet spot, is because there's a lot of things that shift in midlife. Like there's a lot of things that I climbed the ladder. I got to where I wanted. I did it this way. But now I feel a sense of loss because I sacrificed some relationships or meaning or purpose in my life as I did that. I worked really, really hard on this one thing, and now I want to be a whole person in my life. And in midlife, those things start bubbling up. My kids start going to college. I start realizing I've got the house and the boat and the cars, but I really want friends as well. And how does a midlife leader get all of that? They feel like things are destabilized anyway. If we can step in there during that, they feel not destabilized, but they feel reinventive. They feel like they can reimagine things. And when that leader gets behind all of that and they realize a more effective way to lead is to distribute power, to open the trust bucket a little bit more, to share with your employees a little bit more than you ever would have otherwise, and to be more transparent and maybe even slightly more vulnerable with them. When they realize that, then the team can start saying, we can behave like that. So less than retraining them, what we do is we just help them see what their leader is going through. The power of transformation that the leader has can take effect now on the team. And so how does the team become more open? How does the team become more transparent? How does the team become more vulnerable? And then they start relating in a different way. So it's less of structure and more of relating. And then the instruments that we use with the leader and with the team, we can just start mapping, are those behaviors changing in the culture at large, so that they feel this sense of ROI, if you will, that my change is now affecting business change. And when business change gets affected, then our income statements start balancing better, and our profitability line looks more, and our customers are more satisfied. So we just start drawing the linkage between all of that started because a leader was courageous and went first.
Yeah, that makes sense, because you want the leader to be able to believe that this is in supporting the transition and the transformation of the teams and the culture. How do you define the culture? So you got teams, so you got leader, teams, culture. What does the culture represent? Like, can you define that for me?
People have asked me that question many times, and I refer to Seth Godin. His definition is the one that resonates with me the most. And his actual quote was, "Culture is people like us doing things like this," right? So every organization, every microcosm, every grouping of individuals has a culture because it's people like us doing things like this. And we tend to get around people who are like us and then normalize the behavior that we do, right? So today, there are many different types of cultures, but what the difference is here is, I'll give you an example. I get a lot of calls from HR leaders, and their call will come in and they'll say something like, "I've been given the culture project and I heard that you work in this space. How do you go about that? What could you help us with?" So I start asking a lot of questions. And at the end of the day, it generally comes down to the fact that they want to be able to put words on a piece of paper that define who they are as an organization, right? Some might say mission, vision, values. Others say, here's our core essential values. Here's how we show up. Some of them even want to take it to a behavioral level. But ultimately what those do is they end up as the brass plaque when you enter their workforce, right? They enter their work building. It's there on the wall.
Yeah.
And every day employees walk in and out past that. And they say, "But I don't really understand it," and they pay no attention to it, because what someone said they wanted and the way that people personally show up, they're probably slightly different, right? And they'll spend inordinate amounts of time in a boardroom wordsmithing and making sure those words are the most benign words they can possibly get so that no one has disagreement with them. And they're going to say something like integrity, honesty, and trust, or respect, or whatever, right? Every company has that. But some people will not interpret that the same way, and honesty will not be honesty. Honesty will be artificial niceness, right? Harmony might be a better word. So what I tell those HR leaders are, I'm probably not your person, because unless the person that's in charge or who really wants to change the culture is calling me, it's not a project that you do. It's a becoming of a leader that has to happen. And then it's a becoming of many leaders. And then it's a becoming of many leaders and teams. And so suddenly the people like us start to shift, and doing things like this start to shift. You can't shift it by just putting words out there and saying, "Everybody see what this means, now go do it."
Right. Yeah. I've been probably guilty of that myself. Like, I got to put all this down in words. And yeah, it's interesting. So do you have any stories or any like case studies or anything like that this has really worked for a company that you can, maybe not even your company, maybe you've seen another company really implement this and change a lot in a positive way that's helped them in this new kind of environment we're in?
So the story I'm
going to challenge you a little bit.
Yeah, I like the challenge. I mean, it wouldn't be a business unless we got results, right? So,
right.
I can give you a couple examples. Like, let's start with this case study of a CEO. It came to me highly reactive, highly nervous. He had just in the role of a CEO for about a year, and took over the role from the legacy founder of this organization. The board of directors is still family members, and now he is the first non-family member CEO of the business. Okay? that gives you the situation. And highly reactive, because he wants to make sure that he honors the founder's legacy. He wants to make sure that he deals with the family appropriately, and they still have an expectation that they're going to earn investment off of this business that their family member had built. Yet this leader had become overly nice, I would say. He has taken on a lot of tendencies of being very agreeable, which also has the negative consequence of being very passive, right? Allowing other people to sometimes call the shots and not really give his opinion, not wanting to seem that he steers the ship. Well, downstream, there's a lot of challenges in the employee base, right? There's poor performance issues that get tolerated and the person keeps getting moved around and there's not a lot of direct feedback, right? So all of these situations are happening. Well, he came one day and was very, really nervous and wanted to, he was having some conflict with one of the board members. And wanted to figure out a way to reorganize the business so that this board member could exit the business, right? Offering an employee stock option program as an example to buy some ownership back and give the board some money. But at the same point, the whole situation was that he was bringing up was trying to control everyone else around him. If we did this, if we did this, if we did this, then what we would do is this would be the result. So it was almost like playing this overly complicated game of checkers or chess even. And one move on the opponent's part could throw his plan into a lot of different scenarios. And so I was just sitting there as an executive coach, mirroring that back to him. What I had to do was remind him that it's much easier to control yourself than it is to control other people, right? We had done some mapping exercises which showed that even his employees saw this kind of overly passive and agreeably nice individual at the expense of some of the community concern or being able to speak into existence with authentic candor. And he recognized that, didn't want to be known as that. And so when he started to pivot some of his behaviors and just state his own opinion, right? Share his own thought. What happened was the board members could start respecting him a little bit more and they started sharing their own opinion. Then differences became opportunities to grow. Tension became productive tension that got us to new and innovative outcomes. Direct feedback to employees started to become ways that increased performance. As a result, new and innovative ideas got birthed into the business and new ways of relating became, and also, therefore, new business results were starting to materialize. But just as an example, it just starts so much with the culture or the climate, if you will, that one person creates around them. And everybody starts seeing this is the definition of leadership at this place. And this is what gets tolerated, gets repeated. So they're just repeating many of those same behaviors outward. But now the culture speaks with a lot more candor. They're still agreeable and friendly with one another, but they will speak their opinion in a more direct way in order to get to an outcome that is better than any one person could have come up with. And they have a lot less conflict, a lot less frustration, a lot more entrepreneurial spirit and drive. And the board members seem to be much happier with the way the company is operating and feel a need less to try and direct and control because they feel like the actual leaders are in charge of the business. So
that's a great story. It's a great story. Yeah. So, what is it that you, from you're an executive coach, what is your kind of ideal company or exec that you're trying to coach? Is there a specific realm you're in, like type of business, startups, established businesses? You talk about midlife a lot. What are you looking for in a client?
Yeah, my ideal client tends to be the person that's between 37 and 52. Those tend to be about the bookend marks. Why that space? Because they're in a space of realizing I'm reinventing a lot of things. And that includes what I thought I wanted and what I do want and how I want to go forward leading the rest of my life. They've probably gotten to the point where they've had large success. They have the title and the car or the responsibility that they set out. They probably have a lot of what would appear on the outside as the social rewards of being very successful in their life. But internally, there's probably a feeling of guilt or remorse to some extent, and they're wondering, is this all? Is this all there really is? Did I work this hard to get this, only to realize I still want more? And they can't, it's sometimes hard for them to trap themselves into telling other people they want more, because from the outside in, it looks like you've got everything you want. And that more that they're looking for is usually an intangible. And in order to get the intangible, it's much different than the way that they got the tangibles. They knew how to work hard to buy the house. They knew how to work hard to get the car. They knew how to work hard to get the promotion. What they don't know is working hard isn't going to get me the sense of connectedness or purpose that I really want. And so when they're in that spot, that's why it's the midlife executive is the sweet spot, because they will often say they feel stuck. They're not really stuck. They're just kind of in a chrysalis moment. They're in one of those spaces of things feel a little too tight, and I'm wiggling myself into a creature that I don't know yet what its purpose is. And they're learning that all of the years of experience that they had up to this point are necessary and valid. And we have to go back and look at all those touch points to say, what does this really mean for your future, right? You got this experience and you change this way and you learn this core value. And when you put all that together, your future is going to look very different, but it can only do that if you allow yourself to morph into a different being. You can't, you were not meant to crawl into this cocoon as a caterpillar who ate things off the ground. You are meant to fly with the wings of a butterfly, so to speak. Then it doesn't really matter the size of the organization, because if you have a leader in that space, they really do commit to what does change look like for me holistically. And when I create change and go first in becoming a better human, I can create teams and cultures where people will want to follow and become better humans. Because ultimately that's our existential cry is, I want my life to matter. I want my purpose to be realized. I want to fit and belong in a place where people care and give concern to me. And I'd love to do that for other people. Unfortunately, our modern workplaces haven't always allowed that to happen, because modern workplaces have been organized for efficiency, not for human growth.
Right. I love the fact that what you're doing is having an impact. I mean, for sure, there's a lot of people that probably need that help. What is the best way for somebody to reach out to you? Where can they find you? Do you have a website? Do you have a program? Something? How do they get started working with you and find you on the World Wide Web?
Yeah. So a quick Google search is probably going to bring up Conjunction Leadership. That's my website. From there's a lot of different ways. I'm most active on LinkedIn. I don't do a lot of other social media, but on LinkedIn, I'm posting regularly there content or thought-provoking articles or things that I've authored. You can also find there a way to download a PDF ebook that I've written. Or, as you mentioned, I'm still small enough and boutique enough, and I love the personal touch. I still love it when people just reach out with a blank email, and jim@conjunctionleadership.com comes right to my inbox, and I generally will respond right away to it with whatever questions or ideas that you want to. I set up a lot of just get to know you calls, people ideating about where they're at. And I find the most courageous thing that someone can do is set up that first call and say, I don't think I'm broken, but I don't know where to go. Right. And in that space, we can really start figuring out, what does your ideal future look like? What do you want to become? And what do you need to give up in order to get that? So
that's great, Jim. That was a great conversation. Thanks for sharing your experience, your insights on leadership and where we're all at and where we're going. Yeah. So, all right. Until next time. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me.
That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. If you want to comment on this episode's page, provide me with requests on topics for future episodes, or inquire about being a guest, please find your way to thebuilders.fm. You can contact me there or add a comment under these show notes. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you're interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.